Welcome back to another episode of Solo No More. I'm your host, Catryce, and I'm not entirely sure where to begin this episode. I just don't know where. There's so many places that I could start. There's so many things that I want to say, but I am scared of publishing this episode. If you're new to Solo No More, there is no script, there is no outline. It's from the heart, off dome, very little editing, which is done primarily by AI. Right now, I'm nervous. I'm nervous about how I will be perceived when I publish this episode, the DMs that I might receive, the conversations that may be had where I'm the topic of conversation because I published this episode. I'm recording this episode on Sunday, February 2nd. I will be publishing this episode on Sunday, February 2nd, and I'm nervous. I'm nervous because this is really vulnerable. I'm nervous because I don't want to be seen as an angry Black woman. There's a lot. There's a lot going on in my head. I feel it in my chest. But we're just gonna dive in, and thank you for being here. And yeah, we're just gonna kind of see where this goes. I want to start by addressing the fact that my mom is white. My dad is Black, and growing up, it was really uncomfortable for me to have conversations with kids who would question whether or not I was adopted. It was difficult because to me, it was normal to have a Black parent and a white parent. I didn't understand why people didn't get the concept that, you know, I could have a white mom and not be adopted. I find it interesting, though, that I was hardly ever asked if I was adopted if I was around my dad. But when people saw my mom, and if they hadn't seen my dad, they wondered if I was adopted. And that was uncomfortable. I was in first grade, so probably around like 7 years old. Can't quite remember the age I was when I started first grade, but I'm guessing 7 years old. But I was 7 years old when I became conscious of the thoughts that I was having around walking into rooms and taking note of the skin tones of everyone in the room, taking note of whether or not I was the only person in the room that looked like me. And like, it's really hard because I don't want to say that there weren't other kids of color in the room, but oftentimes I was the only one or one of two, maybe three kids who had dark skin. You know, it's hard because you can not be white but still be white passing, you know, as a person of color. It's interesting. That's not my experience though, so I don't really know what it's like to be like that. But I was very, like, 7 years old, I became very conscious of my thoughts around that. Like, I became very aware just that I would walk into rooms, scan the room, see who else looked like me, did anyone else look like me? And I just kind of, like, filed that away somewhere in my brain. Like, it wasn't like I was like, oh, just a bunch of white kids or something like that. Like, it just, like, was like, I just took note, it got filed away somewhere, and it just sits there. Like, I know that. Like, I know that at 7 years old, first grade, that's when I started taking note of it. Or at least when I became aware of it. And I was probably aware of it earlier than that, considering the fact that, like, my mom was white, my dad's Black. If you just do a quick scan of me with them and a bunch of other families, you would maybe, like, I don't know. I don't look like them in terms of, like, skin tone. Like, I'm a mix of them. Like, that to me makes sense. But still, again, people would ask if I was adopted. I have a cousin who is a few months younger than me, so we, same grade growing up. We didn't go to the same school until high school. But I remember being in elementary school when I would go to her birthday parties, or, we would have play dates, or she would come over to my house, and, like, when we were introducing each other to new people, new kids that, like, we weren't aware that we were cousins or stuff, I remember reading kids' faces when she would be like, "This is my cousin," or I would be like, "This is my cousin." And I could just read their faces, and I could just tell the gears were going in their head trying to piece together how we were cousins. That was uncomfortable. I don't think I've ever really talked about that, but that was uncomfortable. And it wasn't uncomfortable and this, like, ew, icky, but it was just like, I don't like that. I don't like that I can't just have my family and that I can't just introduce my family or be introduced and people like, why do people have to try to guess the connection because my skin tone is different? It's uncomfortable. I was 17 when I first really sat down and started reflecting on my experience growing up mixed. I was a high school senior. It was English class, and I can't remember what the prompt was, but there was a prompt that was given that inspired me to write an essay on my experience with code switching. And I don't know what compelled me to write about that, and I can't quite remember what the prompt was, and I think that if I remembered the prompt, I would remember why I chose that. But it was the first time I really sat down and thought about it. I thought about how uncomfortable it was to be asked if I was adopted, how uncomfortable it was to watch kids try to figure out how my cousin and I were related. For them to ask, they would be like, "So is your mom white or is your dad white?" That was wild. To think back on that, that was wild. But like, it was so innocent. They were just trying to figure it out. But for me, on the other side of it, I was like, this is really uncomfy. Growing up, my siblings referred to me as the white sister because I have, or at least had, the lightest skin tone. I don't know if I still do in terms of like sunshine time and all that. But I was referred to as the white sister because for more reasons than just that, but like I liked vanilla bean frappuccinos from Starbucks and my favorite artist is Taylor Swift. I'm not a fan of rap music or rap. I don't know if it's rap music. That sounds so terrible, but I'm not a fan of rap. And most of my friends were white. And I'm going to be completely honest, I used to feel a lot of shame and guilt around the fact that there were times where all of my friends were white. Like, all of my friends were white or white passing. Because I'm going to be completely honest, like, my first crush, so first grade, good old 7-year-old Catryce. First grade, my first crush was a mix. But the thing is that he was white passing. And it was very interesting to me. And this, I remember being in first and second grade and really thinking about genetics and how genetics work because his mom is black, his dad's white, but he looks white. Like he's white passing. He has curly hair, but they're loose curls. But like most of my friends were either white or white passing. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame around that because I felt like I should have a more diverse friend group. But also from first to seventh grade, I was the only one or one of two or three kids of color that had dark skin tones in my classes, in my grade. So, like, it makes sense why the majority of my friends were white. But, you know, when people would call it out, like if my siblings called it out, I felt a lot of shame and guilt around it. I have always felt, not always, that's an exaggeration, that's an extreme. For a long time, I struggled with my identity. I don't struggle with it now, so I don't know why I said always. But up until 17, when I'm sitting down writing this essay, I like struggled with my identity because I felt like I didn't really fit in anywhere. I didn't really fit with the black kids. I didn't really fit with the white kids. I felt like I always did everything wrong. Like, I remember the first time that one of my siblings called out the fact that my friends were primarily white, and I felt so ashamed of myself because I was like, why don't I have a diverse friend group? And I felt like I wasn't a good black person. And that's really hard to say I didn't feel like I was a good black person because I'm not fully black, I'm not fully white, and so I sit in this really weird spot. But I can't really say I don't feel like a good white person. Like, that seems so weird. Like, it's not common for mixed kids to identify with their white heritage, lineage. I don't know. But it felt weird because I felt like I was a bad black person. I can remember being in high school and having thoughts around the idea of being a bad Black person, and then also grappling with the idea of like, but I'm not fully Black. But I remember in 2020, it was the summer of 2020, and my partner at the time said the N-word in front of my siblings. They were all singing a song by a Black artist in which the N-word was part of the song. And I remember my siblings getting really mad at me because I didn't freak out at my partner in front of them. We had a talk later on, a private conversation where I got really heated and was like, that can never happen again. You can never say that, blah, blah. But I didn't say much in the moment because I just didn't know how to address it. And I also, how it was hard. But that moment, that experience kind of brings me to where I'm at today because I didn't outwardly express, I don't know what I was supposed to express. I don't know what I was supposed to say. But because I didn't perform in the way that my siblings thought that I should have in that experience, I was told by them that I didn't deserve, basically, I didn't deserve, and that I shouldn't say that I am Black for Black Lives Matter, that I shouldn't advocate, and that I shouldn't speak up because I was not worthy of doing that if my partner said the N-word. And part of me didn't quite understand why I was being blamed for my partner's behavior and why that made me a bad Black person, but it made me not feel like I could speak because I started to grapple with this idea of how good of a Black person am I? How good of a white person am I? Am I a good person? So that brings us to what has compelled me to record this episode, and that is that there was a conference, or is a conference. I mean, it's an annual thing, but it was like this year's, I don't know. But there's a conference, and I was really excited to attend this conference. I attended this conference last year, or at least, no, I didn't attend the conference last year. I worked the conference last year as a content creator, recording behind the scenes and B-roll. But after last year, I was really excited to attend this year. Last year, they had such a diverse speaker lineup and diverse panelists, and I was inspired. It was so cool to see women who looked like me up on a stage. It made me want to get up on a stage. I was like, this is possible for me. And then they announced their speaker lineup and their panelists for this year, luckily before I bought a ticket. And it was all white women. And I felt really disappointed and frustrated. It was frustrating to me that women of color were hosting the event and selected an all-white lineup and panel. It was frustrating to me that the founder is a woman of color and was okay having an all-white speaker lineup and panel. I no longer felt comfortable getting in that room when I saw the lineup and the panel. I had reached out about if they would need content creation, and I was met with I was told that they weren't at that point of putting together their media team. Shortly after, like within a week, they announced their videographer and their photographer, a white woman and a white man. I never was reached out to about content creation. And part of me is really glad because I think that if they had reached out later after I had found out about the speaker lineup and panelists, I would have had some things to say. But I definitely would have called it out, and I would have definitely said, I do not feel comfortable working this event because of the lineup and the panelists that you have selected. There was a time where I was kind of waiting to see if they were going to reach out, where I was very anxious about if I said no, and if I said that this made me uncomfortable, what conversations would be had about me and what doors would get closed. Of course, I've moved on from that and I don't really care, but I do worry now that as I'm recording this episode, as I'm getting ready to publish this, when I publish this, will doors be closed because I spoke up? Because I made a promise to myself that I wanted to show up more authentically me this year. As I was tapping through my associates' Instagram stories yesterday, seeing them praise the hosts and the founder for putting together such an amazing and an inspiring event, I became extremely frustrated. I was hurt. I felt betrayed. Because I just don't understand how some people can walk into a room like that and not question the decisions. How you can praise someone. You can praise people for not being diverse with their speaker lineup and panelists. It's hard because now I'm left in this space where I'm like, do I even feel welcome in these circles now it feels like seeing people's true colors. And it's crazy because I'm like, this is really how they kicked off Black History Month. February 1st, they host a conference for female founders and the speaker lineup is all white women and the panelists are all white women at the beginning of Black History Month. That's kind of crazy. But it also made me seeing people's stories, it made me feel very protective of Black History Month. And I've always had mixed feelings about the different heritage months. And that's a topic we can get into another day. I think it's, to give a little bit of insight, I think it's that I don't like how I'm treated better during the month of February than I am any other month in terms of brand collaborations, the podcasts, the blogs that I get featured on. Some people are doing it with really great intent, but there are some people where I wonder if they only wanted me, only wanted to collaborate or partner with me because it was it checked the diversity box. It checked the Black History Month Black person box. But we can get into that in another episode. For this, though, I started really being aware that I was having these thoughts last night where I was like, I really hope these women don't post about Black History Month. That they don't go from, oh my gosh, look at this event. It's so amazing, so inspiring. All white women. I only heard from white women today. White women are so inspiring, blah, 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 to being like, Black Lives Matter. Lift up Black voices. I don't know. And I worry that publishing this, it won't make people reflect on their experience and how they show up in the space, but instead it'll be like, oh, I just don't really want Catryce in the rooms that I'm in. And maybe that sounds really selfish, but your network is your net worth. And being a small business owner, being so reliant on the connections that I make in Seattle, in the US as a whole, in the world, because I have friends all over the world, I know what it's like to be, and this isn't a defamation thing because this is just hard facts and there's evidence to support it. But it's hard because it's I sit in the space where I really want to call out and call to action these hosts, this founder. I posted some threads last night and I had someone comment this morning or while I was sleeping, but I saw it this morning and I had someone second the comment, but the person was tag them, at them. And it's I want, it's all good to call out Starbucks and Amazon and McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and all these big companies when we're going to say make a mistake. That's not even what it is. When they are ignorant. And we call them out, but then when it comes to calling out small businesses, it's hard and it feels kind of icky. And it's I do think that there's room for improvement. I do think that they could do better. But I sit in this there's two sides to me. There's, I want to tag them. I want to make a post. I want to say, this was wrong. This was really uncomfortable. This was kind of icky. like, do better. Like, especially the thing that's really hard for me is the fact that last year's lineup was so diverse. Like, I'm like, what changed? Why was that decision made? And so I sit in this place where I'm like, I want there to be public accountability. But then I sit in this place where I'm like, if there's public accountability, then what happens to me? Because this is such a local conference. It's a local, like, these people are all local to me. These are people that I see at regularly at networking events, and I worry for I worry for my business and my business's success, and it also, like, comes to this idea of, like, would I rather be alone and know that I stood up for what I believe in? Like, I still feel like I'm standing up for what I believe, but, like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I showing up enough? Am I speaking loud enough? Am I taking up enough space? But I also worry about that because I don't want to be an angry Black woman. That's not how I want to be perceived. But then it's like, there's two sides of the coin. Honestly, there's way more sides to the coin. It's like a D20. There's so many sides to it, so many layers. And it's tough because I have all of this lived experience. And I remember being at this conference last year and being like, wow, we are really moving in the right direction. I feel like there's seats for me at the tables, that there's a place for me to be on a stage. And I struggled so much growing up being able to see how far I could go because I didn't see a lot of women who looked like me in a lot of spaces. Something that I wonder about, because my teacher for first and second grade was a Black woman. Yes, my mom is a teacher, but I wonder if one of the reasons that I pursued a degree in education was going to pursue a career in sex education and being a teacher was rooted in this idea that that was the first woman of color that I saw, like, in a career, like, in a career field, like, live and in person. Like, it wasn't, I don't know. There's so much to it, but that's something that I wonder about. I'm like, because at 7 years old, I was exposed to a Black woman who was a teacher, did that, plant a seed in me that, like, I should become a teacher. I didn't decide that I wanted to become a teacher until I was 16. But I wonder if that was part of it, like, on a subconscious level. I don't know. I feel like I've covered so much, but I've covered so little. And there's so much more to be said, and there's so much more that I want to say, and there's so many more things that I will say. But I think that this is where I want to start the conversation. We're almost at 30 minutes, and I really don't want to go much longer I really don't want to go too far over 30 minutes. And so I think that this is where I want to start. This is just the beginning of tackling this and really, really accepting that I'm showing up the best that I can. Because, like I said, I struggle feeling like I'm not doing enough, or that if I'm doing enough for the Black side of me, I'm not doing enough for the white side of me, and all this stuff. I've had people tell me that I'm not doing enough, or that I'm not good enough or worthy enough to speak on things like this. And so this is me taking back my power. This is me doing something scary. And this is just the beginning. Because I'm terrified, but I'm also really interested to see what will happen when I press publish for this episode. So thank you for tuning into Solo No More. I hope that you continue sticking around and listening to episodes as they come out, and I will talk to you later.